Good day, Center County families. It's Todd Costello from RE/MAX Center Realty. It's time for the September 2021 monthly value message. Hope you're all having a good month and have enjoyed the end of summer. This month, I just want to give a brief update on the market year to date and talk a little bit specifically about the seller's property disclosure statement. That's a form that's required by law that sellers need to fill out and provide to the buyer before they make an offer on their home. So let's head to the whiteboard and we'll get right into it. Okay, so year to date, the numbers here reflect the total number of closed residential transactions as recorded by the Center County Association of Realtors, MLS, year to date. And that is January 1st through September 3rd. And these closed transactions are in the 4 school districts total that I track: State College, Bellefonte, Bald Eagle, and Penns Valley. So what they show, as always, is consistency. We've got year to date in 2021, we've had 968 closed residential transactions. Last year, the year of COVID, year to date, we had 884. Again, not surprising that number was down a little bit last year because of the pandemic and the shutdowns. 2019, year to date, we had 1,008 closed transactions. 2018, 1,027, and 2017, 977. So really, when you look between the high and we'll skip the COVID year and this year, that's about a 59 transaction difference. Overall, in a market this size, that's not too bad. So again, as always, the market is consistent. I will make note, though, for all my clients that, again, we hear the noise. I just like to remind my clients, both seller clients and buyer clients, when you're hearing chit-chat and chatter, oh my gosh, the market's unbelievable. I've never seen it like this. Everything sells in 2 seconds. The market is booming. Always take that with a grain of salt, because if we go back to the numbers, our market is not growing. The relationship between buyers and sellers is stable and balanced, but our market is not growing. The number of residential home sales over the last 5 years is pretty stable. So that's just something from a long-term standpoint that I keep in the back of my mind. At some point in time, are these year-to-date numbers going to have any dramatic changes, either up or down? Is our market going to be shrinking or truly increasing? With all the infrastructure, the new highways, the new building that seems to be going up all the time, at some point we'd like to see this number increase, but only time will tell. So that's number one. Number two, this month, I want to talk about the seller's property disclosure statement. In the email that you received from me, you've got number 2, which is this, number 1, which is this video. Number 2 is a link to the seller's property disclosure statement. So you can take a look at this form. But I wanted to spend a few minutes, couple of things. It's a form, as I mentioned earlier, that the seller is required to fill out. It's 10 pages. It's like taking a test. It asks questions like, has your roof ever leaked? Do you ever have any water in the basement? Any electrical problems? Things like that. But things to note about the seller's property disclosure statement. Number 1, it's required by law. So if you're selling a home, you must fill this out, and you must give a copy to the buyer. Your agent gives a copy to the buyer's agent, and the buyer signs a receipt, signs acknowledgement that they received a copy. So that's number 1, it's the law. Number 2, which is maybe most important, is real estate transactions in Pennsylvania. At the closing table, real estate is transferred in as-is condition. So at the closing, that's when the transfer occurs. If a buyer makes an offer contingent upon home inspections, they have the right to do home inspections. The buyer has the right to get a homeowner's insurance policy on the property. All those things would occur leading up to closing. But once the closing occurs, real estate in Pennsylvania is transferred in as-is condition. So if the house were to fall down the next day, get knocked over by a hurricane or an earthquake, technically it's the buyer's home. The transaction is closed. The new buyer, the buyer is the owner. Except for this form. This form survives settlement. And the reason behind that is The state wants to make sure that sellers don't accidentally omit defects on the property. They don't accidentally forget about something that occurred, water in the basement a few years ago, and everything is disclosed to the best of their knowledge to the buyer. So just remember, when you're filling out the seller's property disclosure statement, that the statement that you make, that declaration that you make about the condition of your home, that statement survives settlement forever. So just keep that in the back of your mind. C is more about, this is the law, it survives settlement. C is more about how the seller's property disclosure statement comes into play in the middle of a transaction. And the most important note there is, if you have a buyer that makes an offer on your home and it's contingent upon home inspections, and the buyer completes those home inspections and delivers a copy to you, the contract that you have with the buyer, the purchase agreement, requires that the buyer give you full copies of all the home inspections that they have done. So you will have a copy of that. If for any reason, whether it's over home inspections or buyer's remorse, or the buyer doesn't get approved for their mortgage, for any reason you have to put your house back on the market, we need to remember that anything in that inspection report now has to be transferred and disclosed on your seller's disclosure statement. So your statement needs to be updated if you have to put your house back on the market. And whether you update it or we provide copies of all those inspection reports to the next buyer, but one way or the other, all of that information that we receive from the buyer's home inspection needs to be conveyed to the next buyer. So just keep that in mind. That's this month's message. I hope you're all, again, having a great end of summer, and I'll talk to you next month.